right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our PD. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see the presentation as well. Are you all able to see that? Awesome. So today's PD is about the Lucy Calkins opinion writing assessment. We're going to look at grading discrepancies and using assessment to inform our future instruction. Before we really get started, I wanted to go over some professional norms just to make sure that we're creating a very respectful environment. So first and foremost, let's have an equity of voice, listen to one another's suggestions, no judgment. Number 2, everyone is participating. 3 is unity. We're supporting the mission and vision and initiatives decided by our district, and that would be implementing this new curriculum. And 4, you're coming prepared because I've sent you all the necessary tools that you need. And 5, we're making those data-driven decisions. We're not using our feelings. We're looking at assessments and grading off of what we see, not how we feel. So our goals for this session will be as followed. We're going to review what good opinion writing looks like for each grade or for a specific grade level. We're going to familiarize ourselves with the writing rubric from Lucy Calkins, and we're going to kind of clarify some grade level expectations for the grade levels that you're most familiar with, which is first grade. We'll clarify any misconceptions that you might have, and then we'll work together to set goals to guide next year's instructional choices. And so the reason that this is so important is because our district is adopting this new curriculum. We've been using this assessment, but it's important that we are looking at it and making sure that we're all on the same page and grading correctly so that there aren't any discrepancies between grades. And it's also important that we're looking at any data that we're getting from these assessments so that we can inform our future instruction and make sure that we're teaching our students to the best of our abilities. So just as we get started, I thought it would be a good idea. I know getting a new curriculum can be super overwhelming. We already got another new curriculum last year. We've been using this opinion writing assessment, but not the curriculum. So I can understand how that would be overwhelming, and there's a lot of pieces involved in this. So before we even get started, I thought it would be a good idea just to share out how we're feeling. What are your concerns? What are your thoughts? What are your apprehensions? Just how are you feeling? So if you could go ahead and click on that Jamboard link, and it'll open up and you can start a Post-it note with just kind of answering those questions. What are your thoughts on starting this new curriculum? What are your concerns with starting the curriculum, having that we've already used the assessment, and just how are you feeling with it? So go ahead and just take a minute and do that. Well, there's one. I can see him. I'll move them over, make them a bit bigger for everyone to see. All right, I think all of us have put one in now. I'm going to go ahead and go through and just read out what I'm seeing. So one concern is not having enough time to familiarize yourself with the curriculum, especially with working to fit the F&P curriculum that we got last year into our days. I absolutely understand that. F&P already has a lot of pieces and it can already be really overwhelming. Adding in something new will definitely be a stressor, but I think it's important that we are utilizing the PD that our district is offering and making sure that we're looking ahead and working as a team. I'm excited to see how my students will grow with Lucy. I agree, I'm super excited to see where their writing goes, but I'm nervous to introduce something new. Something new is hard, especially when you already have other new things going on. And this past year was not easy for anybody. So I completely understand that. You still feel like you're learning the new F&P curriculum, and now you need to incorporate this writing one into it as well. It's a lot of pieces in one day, absolutely. Nervous with hearing that Lucy Calkins instruction already expects students to have huge background in writing. Due to the pandemic, many of our students are below grade level in writing and reading. That's an excellent point. Maybe that's something that we need to work together as a school, as a building, and work with the grade level below us, see where they left off, see where we can build any bridges and help with that. All right, back to the presentation. Thank you for sharing your feelings. All right, so next, as I said, we're talking about opinion writing today. And so before we get started, I just thought it would be a good idea to kind of share out as teachers, when you're looking at your students' opinion writing, what are some things that you are looking for? So what kind of things are you hoping to see when you're grading it? Even when you're not using this Lucy Calkins assessment, when you're just doing writing in the classroom, what are you looking for? If you want to just share out the ideas, or you can type in the chat if you're more comfortable with that.
I'm definitely looking for like capital letters, punctuations, spacing, and basic as we begin the school year, and transition words as we go through. I always feel like I'm doing a happy dance when my friends are using transition words and give them
Absolutely.
I'm looking for words like because and for when they're supporting their reasoning or supporting their opinion.
Yeah, and like introduction, like sentences and closing sentences.
Oh yeah, those can be challenging.
Sorry. I look for them just to be able to state their opinion on what they're writing about.
Absolutely. Those are all wonderful points. And so it's very nice that you guys brought all those up, because actually we're going to take a look at the rubric next. And so a lot of you are familiar with this rubric because we've been using it, and that's part of the challenge. We've been using this rubric without utilizing the curriculum that goes with it. And I will speak from my personal experiences. I love the way that this rubric is laid out, but I struggle with its lack of specifics because I have not taught the curriculum. I don't know exactly what it means when it says certain things. So for example, the first thing you'll see is that it starts pre-kindergarten to grade 1 and grade 2. For today, we will be looking at grade 1. And then you'll see attributes on the left-hand side. So the things that you're looking and you're grading are overall the lead, the transitions, the ending, the organization, the elaboration. And then on the back side, the craft, the spelling, and the punctuation. I find that this backside is a little bit more black and white. It's a little bit easier for me to grade. Personally, where I struggle is the front side. There are some things that are just a little ambiguous to me, a little not as clear to me. I'm wondering if maybe you have those same struggles. But like I said, those attributes along the left-hand side are what the assessment is essentially focusing on. So for the purpose of this PD, we're just going to focus on first grade because the majority of us are teaching first grade. So kind of like the things that you said, you'll see things like we are writing our opinions with likes or dislikes. I know for me personally, getting my students to write about their dislikes isn't always something that comes as easily. They're very easy, or it's very easy for them to write about what they do like. The dislike is not as easy. A beginning that gets the reader's attention and names their opinion, using words like and because, including an ending sentence, something that I kind of call like a gift wrapping sentence to wrap up your writing. Parts separating the attention getter and adding in more details. So that elaboration piece, at least one supporting reason, being able to back up your opinion, and then details in the pictures and the words. Grade level spelling and grade level punctuation as well. So the next activity that we're going to get to do is in a breakout room. And so you're going to go through, we'll be in 2 different rooms. You're going to share out with a partner your greatest strengths or your greatest weaknesses or struggles or difficulties while using this curriculum. Where do you struggle or where do you feel successful? And then If you can point out any areas where in that rubric where you struggle and why, that would be fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I will create breakout rooms. When you see those buttons, if you could go into them, that would be great. All right, opening them now. You will have about 5 minutes. At this point in my presentation, I will be hopping into breakout rooms to help with conversation, make sure that we're on task and engaged, make sure that we're answering the right questions. I do believe that when I'm in those breakout rooms that nothing is recorded, so I'm going to pause recording and pick up recording when we come back. Okay. There we go. Welcome back. Hello, hello. All right. How was that time? Good. I heard some great discussions while we were in those breakout rooms. I figured since we were separated, we could do a little bit of sharing. So anybody willing to share with the group kind of what they talked about in their breakout room? Where are you struggling? Where are you confident? Those kinds of things.
Well, Morgan and I'm unmuted, right?
Yep, you're good.
Morgan and I, we both agreed, at least in struggling, that the craft was the hardest for us, especially it's kind of vague, and then it's also worth those double points.
Yeah, those double points, they really get you. So what do you feel that you need from the curriculum or from the assessment or instructional wise to make you feel a little bit more confident in that area?
I mean, right off the bat, I would say definitely more like of a description, like what they're looking for, because I mean, it just says the writer used labels and words to give details. That's very vague.
So maybe some examples would also help.
Examples would be great.
Okay. Is there an area that you two talked about where maybe you felt like, wow, this is really easy, I feel really successful here?
I think the language conventions are probably like the easiest because spelling, punctuation, either they used them or they didn't.
Sure, exactly. And Mackenzie and Krista, what about you guys? Did you find anything that you were struggling with or really successful with?
We had, so when we had talked about, we had a rich conversation. And so when we talked about strengths, we had discussed that, like, you're great at using and teaching transition words to them. And definitely like the spelling area, like phonics and them knowing spelling patterns. However, I think when we talked about weaknesses, like the details, right? Like my little guys are great at telling me one thing, but elaborating on that, right? And giving you multiple reasons why they might love pizza is really hard, especially on different levels of academic performance. And then we also said, or at least for myself, like lead sentences and closings are like those, my friends that struggle, especially during the pandemic, of not, some of them didn't have any writing exposure.
Sure.
To make that difference through this whole year has been a big challenge for us. Mackenzie, what else?
I was going to happen with the lead. Grade level for the lead, it says the writer wrote a beginning in which he got the reader's attention. Because we don't use Lucy Calkins right now, like what does she mean by get the attention? Does that count as stating my favorite candy is Skittles? Or is it, does that grab the reader's attention? Or is it, what's your favorite candy? My favorite candy is Skittles. So like, is she expecting a question or just make a statement? And does that count as grabbing attention?
And I think not having those lessons that were supposed to be the ones being assessed is is you're not getting that example of, well, what does that look like at a first grade level? What does that sound like? Is just stating your opinion getting someone's attention, or do they need more at such a young age? And going back to that pandemic piece, like these kids next year are going to be missing a lot. And so it's important to look at this assessment data and see like what part of this instructional piece are they missing, where I can go back and I can use that to craft better instruction for the future so that I'm filling in those gaps for them. But also, like, going off of all the things that you said, I think a big struggle, especially with little kids, especially primary students who just came out of a pandemic, would be that elaboration piece. So writing more. And even a beginning or an opening and an ending sentence is writing more. It is elaboration. It requires one more step or one more sentence. And for some, that is hard. So I think it's really important that we're also working on like writer's workshop version where we're working on that writing stamina. They really need to be able to continue writing, especially when there's a time constraint on this assessment itself. So thank you for sharing those ideas. Those were all really wonderful and very honest, and I appreciate that. So our next big piece, our next exciting piece that you guys get to do is you're going to look at an actual sample of first grade writing. You're going to give it a try with the rubric that you have. I'm not going to go in a breakout room. You'll just stay here. So when you're done, just give me like a thumbs up or something like that. I figured we could take 5 to 7 minutes to just kind of get comfortable with the rubric, read through, figure out where you think the student is, and then we're going to go over scores when we're all done. So go ahead and do that. How's everyone doing? Any questions, concerns so far? Going well? Okay. And then just make sure that you're tallying or you're adding up those points and you get that final score as well. Please. Anybody need more time still? Okay, one more minute, sure. All good. Awesome. Okay. So one of the reasons that I wanted us to do this was because I noticed even in my own grade level team that when we looked back at the same assessment, we all had just small discrepancies in how we graded things. So I thought it would be important for us to look at. So if you have your scores readily available, I made us a little chart and I figured we could look together and kind of see how we graded in comparison to the rest of the group. So Krista, do you mind going first for us?
Would love to. Okay.
Good. I love the enthusiasm. So starting at the top of your rubric, just with a 1, or like you can do the 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, or 4. What did you give for overall for the writing?
3.
3. And your lead?
3.
Okay. Transition?
3.
Ending?
2.
Organization?
2.
Elaboration?
3, and then so doubles to 6, right?
Yes. Craft as well?
4 is a double, sorry.
Spelling?
3.
Okay. And then punctuation. I'm sorry? 2.
Yeah, sorry.
And no, you're okay. And your total was?
28.
Okay, awesome. Mackenzie, you want to run through those same scores for me? Oh, you're on mute.
I have a 3 for overall,
Okay.
a 2 for lead,
Okay.
2 for transition, 1 for ending, 1.5 for organization. I got a 3, so that was doubled already. 1.5, so 3 doubled.
Okay, got it.
And then I did a 1, so a 2 doubled. Spelling, I did 1.5. And punctuation, I did 1.5.
What was your total?
All, I said 17.5.
Okay, thank you. And Morgan?
Okay, sorry. I don't know if I doubled it or not, so I might have to re-add it. But for overall, I gave it a 2.5.
Okay.
For lead, I did 2. Transitions, I did 2. Ending, I did 1.5.
Okay.
Organization, 2. Elaboration, 2, so 4, because doubled. That makes sense. Craft would be a 3, doubled. Yeah, 3.
Okay.
Spelling, I gave it a 2.5.
Okay.
Punctuation, a 2. And I might have to re-add that really quick.
Sure, go right ahead, and we can ask Katie what her scores were while
Okay.
in that.
I had overall 2,
Okay.
lead 2, transition 2, ending 1, organization 1.5, elaboration, so doubled 2, and then craft doubled as well 2,
Okay.
spelling 2, and punctuation 2, so 16.5.
Okay. Morgan, do you have your total?
Yeah, it was 21.5.
Awesome. So looking at
mine's
this,
0.5, 16.5.
oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so looking at this chart, I can see a few things. So when I'm looking, for the most part, we agreed on the lead. We were pretty close on transition. As far as ending went, those friends that gave a 1, what more were you looking for or hoping for to see?
I kind of struggled with that one because I could tell that their mind was done, but I didn't feel like wrapped up, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So when I asked for a last part, I think, oh no, okay. So for grade level 1 was the writer wrote an ending for his piece.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to them, I think their thought was done there, but it wasn't necessarily an ending. And
Sure.
again, I don't know what Lucy's asking for in an ending there. Is she asking like, I don't know.
Well, you don't have a clear expectation of what that would look like for a 6 or 7-year-old. Absolutely.
Yeah, I gave it a 1 too because
Sure, go
you
ahead.
had like gift wrapping at the beginning of our presentation. You said you want something to wrap up the sentence and give it like a bow, and I felt like that did not wrap it up.
Absolutely.
That was kind of my thought too.
Mm-hmm.
It was just kind of like an extension of the opinion. It wasn't really like all nicely wrapped.
Yeah, there was like a second part to it almost. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then when I'm looking across, the other thing I see a large discrepancy in is our elaboration. So does anyone want to talk on that, about what they did see, what they didn't see, what they thought they were missing, or what they thought the student had?
I sat personally on this one for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
Because like for, I think kindergarten, 2 points was the writer put everything she thought about the topic on the page. How in the world do I know if that's everything they thought about? I don't know. And then the writer wrote at least 1 reason for his opinion. Well, I believe they had 2, right? Because I can go, what was it?
Swim in my
Because
pool.
Yeah, my friends get to or something like that.
Yes.
They did have reasons. So I don't know. I sat back and forth on that one for a really long time.
Sure. Does anyone else want to add to that? Like, what were you thinking, Krista? Maybe with your 6.
I gave it a 3 and then doubled because my experience with having a whole class of these, right? And I'm looking at all of them. This does really look like they're elaborating compared to some other friends if I'm trying to evaluate where we are. And sure, list more than one. And I think when we think about, or we look at like, this would be, is this the end of the school year? Is this the start of the school year? Because at the start of the school year, sometimes we just write down like a word. So if we're thinking about that, this really does show that they would be at grade level and they were doing, writing more than just one reason why. But that's because I have past experience with just using the rubric in first grade. However, I do still feel like I could use a lot of PD on doing it better.
Well, and I also think it's important to note that like you all are looking at a writing sample from a student that you're not familiar with. So you really, and it wasn't clarified whether it was the start of the year or the end of the year. You were just given a piece and asked to grade it. And knowing that, it's hard for you to say whether or not a student put everything that they were thinking onto a paper, just like Morgan said. I do think it's important to note that to me, it appears in their writing that they think summer's the best because they get to swim in their pool. And then to me, the my mom and friends get to is like an additional thought. So in a way, they are adding more. But I agree that maybe if this were like the end of the year, I would maybe want to see one more sentence or a little bit more detail. But at the end of the day, I think that we can find a happy medium. So without going through all of the points, I'm going to switch back to my presentation. I am going to switch up your breakout rooms, and I would love it if you could revisit the writing sample with the partner that you're assigned and go through and say, okay, well, what did you get for overall? Well, I got this. Why did you do this? And describe and explain your own thinking so that you both can hear each other. And then go back and with your writing sample, go ahead and just highlight or underline or make note of on the paper if you're using an electronic copy, kind of what part led you to where, why you thought that, and see if maybe you and your partner can get to an agreement about what that score should be. So there aren't as many large discrepancies. And I'll give you another, I think maybe for this one, because the conversation is longer, we'll do about 10 minutes for this one. I will assign those breakout rooms down. All right, there we go. Same thing goes for this section. At this point in my lesson, I am going to enter breakout rooms with the participants and help maneuver the discussions for why did you choose what you choose, to just try to understand like where some teachers might not be meeting. And some of this is difficult for others because there are some staff members in this PD who, although they work for my building and don't teach the Lucy Calkins curriculum currently, they do use the assessment. But in past years in other schools, they have used the curriculum. So maybe those teachers have a better understanding of what they're looking for. I also think it's important that like as a grade level, which most of us are working team members, that they're on the same page. So when we're grading this, or grading from a pool of 60 some kiddos, we should all be on the same page for what we're looking for in terms of our expectations for first grade. So I'm going to go into these breakout rooms and I'm going to make sure that those conversations are on task and they're respectful and that we get to some really good thoughts, or we get some really good thoughts out. Welcome back. Do we have Does anyone need more? No, we're good? Okay. So in your breakout room groups, did you feel like you were able to come up with some areas where maybe you disagreed and then you were able to discuss and maybe now you agree on something? Or are there still areas where maybe you still disagree, or some areas where you're still confused? If anybody's willing to share what they talked about in those breakout rooms.
Yeah, I can go. So I was with Krista, and we talked about how we were very different for our craft. And that was something I was confused about before. And so I had put a 1 double to 2, and she had put a 2 double to 4. And I asked her to explain why. Mm-hmm. When she explained that, I'm trying to minimize. I want to see
the tabs are open.
I'm trying to see the rubric. Hang on.
I get it. Online learning.
And this is fun. So I had put that the writer had drawn like what they liked. They liked summer, they drew a pool. And so I was like, okay, yeah, they drew it. That's a 1. But Chris explained that because they had put the details in the writing about, they named like a few people and things, that's why they gave them a 2. And I didn't really see it like that. She interpreted it differently. But when she explained, I was like, okay, I see why you did that. So we came to a consensus on giving that student a 2.
Yeah, and what that piece looks like for that grade level. Those details, like that might not look the same for a student that's not in primary. And so that's not as easily recognizable. And someone who has that experience can definitely add to that. And that's why it's helpful to have those conversations, especially with your grade level teams, because you want to make sure like you're grading the same pool of 60 some odd, maybe more, maybe less kiddos. And if you're all grading and you're all grading differently because we're all looking for different things, or you all have different grade level expectations, that makes it difficult for the next year's teacher to look at that assessment data and kind of understand where your students will be at. So it's important for you all to be on the same page. Mackenzie and Morgan, were you able to find anything where maybe you agreed and then were able to, or disagreed and then maybe were able to agree?
We talked about elaboration a lot again, because we were both a little bit on the lower end, and Mackenzie made a good point. She said like when she's looking at these, like she starts at the first part of the rubric and looks, it's like for the first part of the rubric, it said the writer put more and more on the page, and she's like, okay, I can move up now. And then she saw the writer put everything she thought about the topic on the page. And I forget what you said exactly, Mackenzie, but she's like, summer's 2 months long. There's no way that was everything. So then she would kind of stop there, but then listening to everybody else that gave it like a 3, to have a 3, it just says that they wrote at least one reason for their opinion, which this writer did do. So we kind of shifted our mindset a little bit on elaboration and looked at, okay, well, for grade level 1, they did do what they needed to do.
That's where we would like an example from Lucy. Like, what does she mean? Like I said, summer's super broad. There's more that you like about summer than just going to the pool. So like, how can we say they passed kindergarten? But they did give us one reason. Technically, we're pushing that. They gave us 2 reasons. So we could even push them up to 2nd grade or mid-level between 2nd and 1st grade if we
Sure. Yeah, so that kindergarten to 1st grade, like that transitional spot is where I'm hearing that maybe you're having some concerns. And, you know, maybe that's an excellent point when we do our exit ticket to fill that out and state that, because that means moving forward, maybe the district can look at some professional development that would aim to clarify those areas for you. But I agree, it's also important to make sure that like when you're looking at this, you know the student, like, is this everything that they were thinking? If I know a student well enough, I know how many thoughts they can have about what they enjoy about summer. Is this everything that they could write? Is this everything that they were thinking about? It's also important to look at like the craft that is not just physically written, what they're actually thinking. And because I'll notice it a lot of times beginning of the school year when my friends aren't quite, you know, writing all by themselves yet. A lot of times, like Krista said, I get one word or I get a picture. I don't get a lot to go off of. And I often have to ask them, and from there they can verbalize their opinion, which tells me that they understand what I'm asking them. They just don't have the written skill to do so yet. And so moving along, you all can still see the presentation, correct? Just wanted to make sure. Okay. I have the rubric of how I went through and graded it. And again, I also struggled with that elaboration piece. I do think, based on what we were talking about earlier in terms of like a beginning and an ending, I think because of the terminology, where it says that they got the reader's attention and then in a separate sentence named the topic, I think, for example, for this student, they just named their topic. I think that the summer is the best. They were naming their opinion. They could have done something in an additional sentence, maybe grab the attention more. They did have the use of the words because and. However, I noticed that, and maybe you did too as well, all in one sentence. So I would have loved it if maybe they could have used it to apply it to a second sentence or a second reason. That to me would show a lot of organization and a lot of, and even a transition. I also noted, and this would depend on whether or not you're familiar with that first grade spelling and punctuation. A lot of his words were really well spelt or really well sounded out phonemically. I did notice that they spelled the word get 2 different ways. I think typically this would be something like, especially if it was done at the end of the year, it would be a word that was on the word wall. And so overall, I gave a 3 for overall. I gave a 2 for the lead, a 2 for transition, ending, and organization, just because I didn't feel like that piece was ended with like I said, that gift wrapping sentence that I spoke about earlier. That's something that my students and I talk about a lot. And then for elaboration, I personally think like when I'm looking at this, that this student could have just given me just a little bit more. And then the other piece that I wanted to talk about was a point that you guys brought up earlier about the details. And I see what you're saying about the photo. You can tell what's in it. You can tell what the photo is of. But I also noticed like I'm not seeing any additional details other than maybe that pool and that sidewalk. I'm not seeing any labels. I'm not seeing any of the people that he wrote about or he or she wrote about either. So that piece is also missing for me when I look at details. Because I want your picture to convey your opinion and your reasoning, just like your writing would. And so for craft, I gave a 3. For spelling, a 2.5 based on, like I said, those spelling errors that I noticed, and then a 2 for punctuation, and I ended with a 21.5. So thinking back to our chart, we were all in a pretty similar space, maybe some of us a little above or below. And maybe that's something that after working together and after communicating with grade level team members or other teachers in your building, you can become more on the same page and get more similar scores to move on in the future. Before we leave today, I thought it was important to just think back to what it is that creates successful opinion writing. Although I'm sure you've heard this all a million times because you're all amazing teachers, but you have to use those mentor texts and explicitly teach that fact and opinion and master the verbal sharing of opinions and reasons. So like I said, those kiddos, they might be able to draw it, but not write it. But if they can verbalize it to you, at least you know they understand the difference between fact and opinion, and they can share their opinion and their reasons. And they might be able to share more with you verbally than they can with writing anyways. And so they might have another supporting reason. And going along with that, explicitly teaching those parts. So that would look a lot like having that opening sentence, that attention grabber, and having that ending sentence, that closing, that gift wrapping. Using graphic organizers and webs, this can help with having organization and having those 2 separate parts, or the opening sentence, stating your opinion, giving your reasons, and a closing sentence. Verbally sharing helps my students a lot. Planning what they're going to say before they say it kind of goes along with those graphic organizers. And then model, model, model. They watch me write all the time just so they can see my thought process and my writing process. And then I would explicitly be teaching, like if this was a writing sample that I saw in class, I would specifically teach about the details in the picture that I'd like to see and the labels and adding more to our writing. And then the drafting, editing, sharing, and publishing, making sure that we're including that in our writing block. So now before we say goodbye today, now that we've all gotten a chance to kind of work together, and we looked at a writing sample that's not from our own classroom, I want you to think back to your writing samples that you graded from the end of the year this year. Are there any areas or attributes that now, after doing this little workshop, that you feel like you maybe should go back and regrade? Or is there an area of concern? It's also a good idea to look out for an area of concern in your students' writing and your assessments where you think, wow, my students really didn't grow in this area. This is something I really need to work on, because after discussing this with my colleagues here today, I've noticed like maybe I wasn't looking for all of the things I could have been looking for, or maybe I wasn't giving all of the points that I could have been giving, or maybe there's more that I need to be looking for. So if you just want to take a minute, look over your assessments, think about it, and then there's a Jamboard link in this slide as well that you can click on that will take you to the Jamboard, and you can kind of write in anything that you feel like you need to regrade, or any areas where you're like, wow, I still need to really work on this instructional piece. And so if it takes you back to that original page, if you hit that arrow in the top where it says 1/2, it'll take you to the second slot. So what are some things that maybe you need to regrade, or an area of weakness for your students where you'd like to improve? All right, looking at what I'm seeing, it's very interesting that some of you are noticing the same things. I think maybe having these conversations have opened you up to like, oh, is this really what I was looking for, or should I be looking for this instead? And so going off of that, I've noticed that someone said I need to work on my instruction of leads and endings. I feel many of my students did not include those components this year. Yeah, so differentiating between like, what is that opening sentence supposed to look like for first graders? Is it just stating your opinion, or is it that attention grabber? How can we encourage them and instruct them to do that, to add more? I realized that an area of weakness for my students was crafting an opening and closing gift wrapping sentence. I would focus on improving that. After looking at assessments, I feel like I need to improve my instruction on transition and craft. There seemed to be consistently low scored on my rubrics. That is also something that I was looking at this year where I noticed, well, consistently I'm scoring this really, really low. Why is it? Am I scoring it incorrectly, or is it something that my instruction is just not hitting? And then, make this one a little bit bigger. After this PD, I think I should go back and look at my students' craft and elaboration pieces of their rubrics, dissect those strands more, absolutely, especially for craft. I think I tend to score more strictly. I've also noticed that I do that when I work on this assessment. I don't think that I'm a strict grader, but something, when I pull out Lucy Calkins, I'm like, no, they're missing this, they're missing this, they're missing this. And I want to go back and be more positive and look for strengths. So absolutely, thank you for sharing that. Based on those things that we saw on that Jamboard, can any of you think of some pieces of instruction that we could include that we could like reach out to others about, like, if you're struggling with this, I suggest you do this. Can we think of anything in those areas? Like, obviously, if you're missing pieces and you're hoping to go back and inform instruction in the future, if you feel like you're missing that opening sentence, maybe you would work on that modeling piece. What else could we do to inform instruction for the future?
I like the modeling piece, and also giving, we talked a lot about some of our students are below grade level, giving them their sentence stems so that you can support them and lead them into what you want or what is expected.
Using those sentence stems would be very helpful.
I think showing them examples of others, maybe like from past years, like other opinion writing. Like this is what we're looking for. This like kind of a, like, oh, the student could add more. This one's kind of middle of the road, and like this one's like above and beyond.
And that even makes me think about those. I haven't personally done it, but I've had some colleagues that have done it where they've done those books that students write and then they publish them and they're able to purchase them. Even keeping one in your classroom and just saying, like, look, this is what other students were able to come up with. Having something to look up to and work towards would be very beneficial.
I think one thing too
go
is,
ahead.
I was saying one thing too is doing peer editing. So maybe let 2 or 3 friends during your writing time come up and share their writing, and then their classmates can give their opinions and where they can improve or what they really like. So that gives them a chance to see what their other classmates are doing, not just students before, because they don't know who those kids are, but they know who their classmates are.
And I love that sharing piece because it builds their confidence. But I used to do like a compliment sandwich where they had to give 2 compliments and then 1 thing to work on. And then that kid could go back to their seat and they could work on that editing skill. Because in first grade, that editing skill can be quite hard to notice your own maybe mistakes. And so going back and reading it out loud and having that thought process can be very helpful for students. All right, you all, thank you so much for coming to the PD. I appreciate you helping me out. There is an exit slip via Google form that you can fill out when we're all done here. But like I said, I appreciate you. Thank you for participating and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.